Hi friends, Tammy here from Canadian Handywoman, and welcome to my workshop. So tonight I'm hosting the first format of my new Handywoman Hangout with a topic. And tonight's topic is going to be about drywall, how to hang pictures and how to fix a hole or two. And I hope that you're able to pick up some information and try something on your own. So I actually have behind me a mock drywall. And I use this in my live workshop to really give you an idea of what you're of what you're doing or like what you're working with. I like to know, I like to understand things before I start to do them. And one of them is understanding all about drywall. Now, drywall is one of the most popular um, surfaces that we find in homes today. Sometimes they're concrete, sometimes they're lath and plaster, sometimes it's just wood, and a lot of times it's drywall. And drywall, often referred to also as gypsum rock, is literally a powder, a really hard powder that's compressed really tightly between two pieces of paper. And each side of the drywall has a different color. There's this craft color, and that's always going to be onto the back end. We're not going to see that. And then there's a white color. And the white color is a soft, smooth paper feeling. Like you can really feel the paperness of it. And it's just two pieces of paper compressed in between the gypsum rock compressed in between the two pieces of paper, and that's it. So when we hang something on the drywall, if you just put a screw into this material over time, if it's not done properly, it will fall out. Okay, and that's why knowing what you're hanging and why you're hanging it and what kind of um, support it needs is really important to know before we start the project. Some items will have instructions on how it should be hung, whether it should be hung with, like if it doesn't say anything, then you kind of got to use your own judgment. But sometimes it will give a package of drywall screws of some sort. Similar to this, you'll get a package in there. And then sometimes it will say it needs to go into a stud. And we I'm sure that you've heard the term stud, and I kind of wanted to show you what a stud is and how you can find it. Now, one thing that I showed in, I'm not sure if you saw my video on tape measures, but a tape measure has lots of hidden information. And one of them is at the 16-inch increment, it's pointed out, it's like highlighted. Every 16 inches in this particular tape measure, it's a red triangle. And the reason why is 8 feet by 4 feet is a standard sheet of drywall. And when we put drywall onto the framed wall, we want to make sure that it's going to be supported in the best way. And over time, the standard has been set that uh, every 16 inches is the best way to do this. And so that everybody makes the same thing so that we have consistency, that is the industry standard. So when you buy lumber and drywall and plywood, typically it's going to come in 8-foot increments. Now there's always examples of reasons why it won't be like that, but for the most part, that's going to be what you're going to see. Now, this is the back end, and this is a sample of what the back end of your wall is going to look like. And it's kind of shrunk down a little bit, but pretty much this is your ceiling, your top plate, and this is your floor or your bottom plate. And then every 16 inches is going to be a stud. And the stud's going to run right from the bottom to the top. There's a window, that's a whole other, bag of yarn, but um, this is what we're going to have behind. So when they say if you need to hang certain things by a stud, for example, a support handle, like if you're in a bathroom, if you need a grip in the shower, or any type of wall mounted TV, very heavy pictures, or very heavy coat racks, those need to be in studs. And the reason why is that a screw biting into this wood will be secured, where a screw biting into this drywall, and if you look here, I have a hammer somewhere here, um, I've got a screw that's just sitting here, and literally, I'll just hang it right out, and it went through the other side. It's so easy. Where with these plugs, they don't bang out, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. But this is when they say you go into a stud, it's because you're going into wood. So drywall is typically, you know, like narrow like this, and your screws are going to be long enough to go through the drywall and into either the wall plug or the stud. So that's what is supporting whatever you're holding up. Go on the other, or before we spin around, actually, no, I'll spin it around and then we'll talk about what a stud or what a drywall plug actually looks like. And this is probably what you're used to seeing. Okay. I've got a gray one, a blue one, and a green one, and they're going to be different thicknesses and different lengths. Okay. And depending on what you're hanging up is dependent on what drywall plug you're going to use. Can you use a bigger plug for a smaller item? Absolutely. Can you use a smaller plug for a larger item? No, because these are weight rated. Now, when you buy these plugs, like if you don't get one that is made for the purpose and you buy them in the store, it's actually going to have a weight rating right on it. See, it says this one here holds up to 80 pounds. Nail fasteners have these weight ratings. Plastic drywall plugs have these weight ratings. You really want to make sure that what you're hanging, the device that you're securing it on, is rated for the item. So if we just have a diploma, that can just be a nail right in the drywall because there's no large weight on it and there's not going to be any pulling on it. Probably not going to be any kids right underneath it. So, you know, we can use just a nail for that. But if we need to go into the drywall, we're going to drill a hole to get your drywall plugs in. Now, how to find the drywall studs. There are devices. I'm not going to go over the stud finder today, but you know, like one way to know is we've talked about the 16 inches and how does that actually play into it. If we start on the corner and we measure over 16 inches, that's roughly about where your stud is going to be. So the old knock test is actually pretty, you know, like it's pretty sound in more than one way. And if you knock on it, you can hear it's a different sound. It's hollow here, and there's no hollowness here. So we know that somewhere in here there's going to be a stud, and it's going to be the thickness of a wood. So we've got, you know, 1.75 inches to play with. If I'm looking for a stud, I'm going to use a really narrow drill bit to make a pinhole to search for the stud. This drills a hole that does two reasons. It makes sure that I go into wood. And how can you tell? When you drill into drywall, like I said, it's two pieces of paper with a little bit of plaster in the side. And when you drill into it, it actually feels it's like you're drilling through paper. There's no resistance at all. And then there comes to a point when you pierce the drywall that when it's through the paper, you're going to know it. Your drill will actually go, like you'll feel it go in, or you're going to feel major resistance. And that major resistance, if you feel it, means that you've gone into a wall stud. Now, you do want to bore your hole in and make a pilot hole, because turning a screw into just wood without a pilot hole is really difficult. So making a pilot hole is really important for that. And one of the tricks to drilling a pilot hole, and even for drilling holes for your drill bits, You want to make sure that you can see thread of the screw on the other side of the drill bit. So the drill bit has to be narrower than either the screw or the wall plug. And then that means that we're giving space for it, we're making space for it, but we're not, it's not going to be in there and kind of be sloppy and be easy to pull out. So it's important that your pilot hole is going to be smaller than either the screw or the wall plug, whichever you're using. So once you put that in and you screw it in, what happens to the wall plug? So if we look, when we start to put this screw into the wall plug, it gets to a point where it gets tight because it's actually tapered on the back. And what happens is, if we look here, the drywall plug actually splits open. See how it's making a V all of a sudden? And it's that V, and it's got ridges so that it can't come out easily. That V is actually what's holding this screw into the wall. If we look at the back of this, see that, but the screw is in the middle, and this drywall plug has split open here, and it's the drywall plug opening up that holds this screw in. So this is the screw on this side, and it's pretty firmly in there. Can it fail? Yes. If you're not, if it's underrated for the weight, yes, it can fail. So we want to make sure that we're using the proper size wall plug. Now, they've come out, like the technology is changing all the time, and they have a new one that looks a little bit different than your standard drywall plug. So this has a blunt nose, and it doesn't really have any threads on it. What it has ridges so that it can't pop out. Well, what this one has, it has a sharp point, and it's straight, and then it's got a corkscrew. And the reason why it's like that is you don't actually need a drill to install these. What we do with this type is we actually just pound it into the hole. So like this is assuming that we don't have, we're not using a stud, right? We need the drywall plug. If you just bang it in like that until you go up until where the screw part is, and then you take a screwdriver and you just turn that in until it's snug. You don't want to over tighten it. We're not going to make this really tight, but you just make it snug. And that's just the same as this blue one. Okay, so it's a new technology in drywall plugs that came across, I'm not sure how many years ago, but it's pretty cool. And you know, this is another one. This looks different than anything you're probably used to seeing, but it splits a little bit differently. So that's why you know, companies are coming up with more inventive ways, and the science is getting better known. So it's making it stronger. Now, some items that require more weight, the more surface tension that it has on the back, and so like when it opens up, it's those two little wings that are giving it the tension so that it doesn't come all the way through. Well, there's something called a toggle bolt. And basically this one, it has a spring. So you make a hole, you put it in, and then the spring opens. And then when you tighten it, it will only, it doesn't close. It holds against the drywall. So it's got more surface tension. And this is typically what you see with plant hangers. Okay. And that's exactly what this one is. So it's a screw like this, it screws down. This will sit on the top of the ceiling, and then the hook will actually screw onto the bottom here. And that's what holds all your plants, is just this little toggle bolt. So the toggle bolt is more secure than a standard wall plug because it's got more surface tension. Well, what they've done now is that they've created these new wall plugs that are that have the butterfly effect, and it's made for regular drywall application. So it's kind of a mix of the two, and this is rated for more weight than what you know, the standard drywall plugs are rated for. So that's kind of nice that there are the options. I'll share a picture if I can. I'm not sure if I can share it in here or on my site. I was in a washroom playing hockey, and they had installed the handrail behind the toilet using just two drywall plugs. Well, what's there now are two giant holes on where the drywall plugs were ripped out of the wall because somebody leaned on that, as they should, because it's a support bar, and those drywall plugs absolutely gave out. Who knows if someone was hurt? You could break not only a body, but you could break the toilet too. And plus, now you don't have a safety handrail. So it's really important to know what the item that you're hanging, what the rating is. And usually in the instructions, if it says a certain item, then that's what we're going to go with. Now, one other thing with drywall is fixing holes. So we maybe had something hanging in a spot and we want to take it down. Well, can you fix it? Yes, absolutely. It's been made easier and easier. And I'm going to show you a couple things that make it so easy. And one of them is this new product of drywall compound. They do come in small little convenient size containers. And as long as it's sealed tight, it'll last quite a while. Okay, it doesn't really, it probably has an expiry date. And as long as you don't let air into it, though, it's going to last for a couple years for sure. But this new drywall compound is pink. And when you put it on, it's pink. And then when it dries, it's white. The reason why that it's important is you have to let this dry before you can put any paint on it. If you try and apply paint to wet drywall compound, you're just going to get a big mess of no, we don't want to do that. So if we have a couple holes here and they're of different sizes. So we've got like a big square one here. Are we going to be able to put just drywall compound in that hole? No. There are different ways that we can repair that. And I don't have time to show here now, but you can put a brace behind it and fill it with another piece of drywall, or you can actually buy a kit. It's a screen mesh that will fit over that, and then you can drywall the whole area, or you can compound the whole area. So depending on like what kind of hole you have is how you're going to actually repair it. But what I'm talking about are just these, like if you take the hole out, if you take the drywall plug out and you want to cover it over. Now, it's always good to keep a little bit of paint when you do paint your house. Getting the same shade remade is can be difficult because it's small increments of different colors that make up, like there's purple and yellow and weird colors in green, because I don't know the chemistry of it, but that's how they make it. And sometimes getting the exact match can be a little bit more tedious. If you do have paint that's kind of older than a year old, take it to the store, any hardware store, whether it's Home Depot or Canadian Tire or Home Hardware, whatever happens to be closest to you, and ask them to reshake it, because there's lots of different materials, and you want to make sure that it's mixed really well, and they will absolutely reshake it at no charge. And we're going to apply some putty. Now, I have two putty knives here, and how we know these are putty knives is because they're flexible. Okay, and we don't want a scraper. You can get the same shape that is much more rigid, and we don't want that because we want to be able to push in. So it's going to actually, like we bend it a little bit into the hole. So depending on the size of the hole, you need your blade to be bigger than the hole that you're covering, so that it just gets covered with one swipe. These blades actually go up to 12 inches. They go from one, I think this is 1.5 inch to 12 inches in for some of the professionals. A good 4 inch or 6 inch putty knife, though, is something that is, not too bad to have around the house and available. And one thing, when we're repairing a hole, we're filling a hole. We're filling the cavity. We don't want it to be on the other side of the wall. So a lot of times what I see when I go into people's homes, and I'm probably guilty of doing it too way back in the day, is like it seems like I have to build it up, right? Well, you don't. You just fill the hole and that's it. So when we take a drywall plug out, the first thing you want to do is make sure that there's no rough edges. So you can't see it here, but there's little pieces of paper that's flecked out. And that's common because like the paper, when you bring out a screw, the paper's going to come out. If you take the butt end of your putty knife or a screwdriver and you just kind of, push it in there, mash it in there, that's going to create a little cavity that will give you a nice flat surface at the end of the day. So we scoop some compound out and we put it on the hole and we scrape it off. Just put it on the hole and we scrape it off and we let it dry. And you see there that it's pink. I don't know if you can see that or not. There's a pink one here and there's actually a white one here that I've done before. And when it's white, it's dry and we can go sand it. You may have to put a second coat on and that's okay. Filling holes with drywall compound is not a quick process. Often 2 coats are required because you might get a little pinhole as it dries. And that's why we don't want to overfill it because it can get a little bit difficult to sand off and it gets, drywall dust sand when you do sand it goes absolutely everywhere. So less sanding that we can do is absolutely better. So if we've drywalled that over, you can see this white spot here. Now, if you're doing a whole big repair and you're replacing a large amount, you're not going to use this pink compound. You're going to use a proper drywall contractor grade compound, and it needs to be primed before it's painted. This drywall compound, this is one thing that you want to make sure that yours has. It says right on it, no priming required. Drywall compound, when it hardens, when it dries, it hardens, and it actually becomes harder than the paper that it's sitting on. So it has a different texture. So when you put paint on it, you can actually see that texture through it, unless it says that it is no priming required. Then it's going to have the same texture as the paper. So that's pretty important to know. If it's not, or if it doesn't say that it's no priming required, then you have to prime it. And a primer is a type of paint that usually has no color, that when you put it on a shiny piece like this, it'll give it the same texture. So when you apply the paint, you don't actually see the texture behind it. And then once we put the paint on, and even with the primer, if you do have to prime it, the actual paint, that's covering the hole, that's going to be at full strength. And then what we want to do is you want to take the paintbrush and you're going to just fan it out. You're going to feather it out so that you're pulling the pigments from the full consistency where it's covering the hole that we need it covered to where it's almost no consistency at the edges. And when it dries, it's kind of a trick to make it look like it's an even space. And if you feather it out, and as long as it's the same color, like the same paint, then you won't be able to tell where that hole is. I can show you examples of walls where this wasn't done, and like where it needed to be primed and it wasn't primed, and it is like chicken pox of the same color, just standing right out. So it's kind of an important feature to do that. So that is kind of the overview of drywall. This is another example of a plug, and this one actually is for cement. So it's not for drywall. And when you buy them, you really have to make sure that the label says, know what you want. Take the time to read what you're getting, and as long as it's made for the purpose, then you'll be able to do well. One other thing that I'll show real quickly is if it is just pictures that needs 5-10 pounds, these wall hangers are absolutely all that you need. Just a hanger, or sorry, just a hammer to attach this into the wall. You don't even need a hammer. I had a client who kept a rock in her kitchen, and she would use that to bang in, you know, like these small types of nails. Whatever does the purpose is what you need for the time. I always joke that when I go over, I have a workshop on introducing the top 10 tools that every person should every homeowner, apartment builder, whatever, should have. And my mom's favorite tool is included in those, and it's a butter knife. And honestly, a butter knife can do pretty much every single job that one of those top 10 tools can do. And if that's all you have, then it's okay to use it. You know, if you need to think quick, feel free to do it. Other options that are available though is renting. So some local libraries have a tool lending library. I know Quinte West for a fact has a tool lending library, and I'm pretty sure that the Kingston library does as well. You can check if your local library has that. Um, that's a way to lend them or to borrow them free. And then other options are rentals. So a lot of the kind of larger tools or more expensive, like where it'd be an investment, whether it's a pipe cutter or, you know, who knows, most gas operated ones, you can rent them at Home Hardware. And I'm not sure about Lowe's. I know for sure Home Hardware, you can rent them out. So that's another option too. But this will hold, you know, the average pitcher. If it's a bigger pitcher, then they come up with these new ones that will hold two nails. And you know, like when the nail goes through this clip, it'll go in on an angle. So it's actually, you know, the science of it that this goes into the drywall. And see, like it goes in only ½ inch, the thickness of the drywall. Like any bigger than that is really kind of overkill, really, unless it goes into the stud. And then this part kind of bends down, that bends up, and where the two surfaces meet, that's kind of what's holding it up, is the friction of it. So if you need, you know, like sometimes using two of these smaller ones is appropriate. If it's like a wider size pitcher, then absolutely using the two are appropriate. Or you can use one of these ones that have two nails in it already. Again, it's knowing what the rating is, and this does on the outside give what the weight rating are for each one of those items. So I hope you've been able to take something away from this. And what I have coming up next is actually an in-person workshop where we get to use my, you know, like mock wall, and the people who are here get to use the drill and drill pilot holes and insert the drywall plugs and screw it in with both a hand screwdriver and the drill bit to just kind of get a feel in a safe place where it's okay to make a mistake. You know, like that's why I love having this workshop space, because it gives people the opportunity to try it without intimidation and without worrying about what's going to happen. So my next tool workshop or drywall and picture hanging workshop is actually going to be September the 22nd here in Quinte West, and I always have new dates coming up. If you go to canadianhandywoman.com/events, all of my events are listed on that website, and I would love to see someone at one of my workshops. And the other option is I can do online virtual assistant calls as well. So feel free to reach out. And if you have a particular question, I'd love to have the opportunity to answer them for you, or work on other topics as well as what you're interested in. So thanks again for spending some time with me. And until next time, bye for now.